Good morning on this Sunday, August 11th, and welcome to the Georgia Gang. Georgia lawmakers join in on the conversations about gun laws after two mass shootings. We've heard it all before, but will anything be different? And despite a growing economy, Governor Kemp orders state agencies to cut their budgets. And local, state, and federal officials are looking at next steps for two toxic polluters that could be causing cancer rates to rise in some parts of metro Atlanta. Alexis, Phil, and Theron are all here. The debate and discussion begin right now.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia Gang starts now.
The attention this week turned to our national and state gun laws after the mass shootings in Texas and Ohio. Here at home, Democrats are calling for tougher restrictions to buy a gun. Senator David Perdue is calling for a bipartisan solution.
Both sides, both political parties are responsible for this. Career politicians haven't moved on this for decades, and yet we still have these events.
After talk this week about so-called red flag laws that President Trump voiced support for, Senator David Perdue said he wants to take a look at the legislation, citing concerns over due process.
This is not about the Second Amendment. This is not anti-Second Amendment. This is about pro-public safety.
Here at home, Georgia Democrats are pushing for tougher gun laws. They want all gun buyers, whether from a dealer or personal transaction, to go through criminal background checks.
But for me, the point is to close all of the loopholes. There is no reason why anybody should find a way not to get a background check.
Quite frankly, in a free democracy like we have today, you run the risk of having things like this. That's why you have legislators to try to deal with it in a bipartisan way.
Phil, though, I want to start with you because I think it's fair to say that legislators have not dealt with this issue in a bipartisan way, and there are democracies all over the world that don't have these types of mass shootings and the numbers of mass shootings. So what do you think it will take to move Republicans on this?
Well, I think it does take a bipartisan solution. I think you can really get some agreement, and I think all of us on the panel have agreed in the past about just take the mental health issue as part of this whole problem. I think that we need to reform laws at the state level where we can reform our commitment laws, even if it's a temporary commitment that a family says that this person is really acting up and is a danger to public safety. And and they need to get the help they need. It could be a temporary type of commitment. So I think that's one thing that I would think most people of goodwill would agree on.
But David Perdue said he might have some concerns about these red flag issues because of due process.
That's correct. You've got to worry about the privacy of people, and as we all know, there's a federal law called HIPAA, and not to get into the weeds here, but that protects people's privacy in the healthcare realm. We're going to have to change that. But I don't think that the knee-jerk cries for gun control in terms of confiscation is the answer.
Well, I disagree completely with you. I think the mental health issue is certainly a challenge, but they need to eliminate this bump stop things that convert these guns.
They did.
The
Trump administration did.
The Republicans and
Georgia
Democrats
need to do that. They need to do that, and they need to take the assault rifles off the streets. They need to ban them.
Most of them are off the streets.
Well, not all of them, and I think implementing a buyback program or some way to just confiscate them to make them illegal.
Theron, where is the middle ground here? Because we know if Republicans move a little bit, Democrats will say it's not enough. We've seen this time and time again.
Right. Well, if you really look at this, it's really a sort of a state issue. Where I commend Senator Perdue for now calling for some bipartisanship in Washington. At the end of the day, we do have a House Bill 435 that State Representative Matthew Wilson introduced in last session. Also, Senate Bill 150, Senator Jen Jordan introduced a bill. Now, Matthew Wilson's bill deals directly with red flags. Senator Jordan's bill deals with people who have been convicted of domestic violent crimes cannot have access to a gun. But also, let's not sugarcoat this. Yes, Democrats need to step up and work with Republicans to have a bipartisan solution. But when you compare us to other countries, and yes, there's domestic terrorism in other countries, but no other country has a president that has aided and abated some of these attacks by his rhetoric and by his tweets. And let me finish. And to say that it's a knee-jerk reaction, innocent lives were lost. People were in a mall, in a Walmart. Can you imagine just going to a Walmart, shopping, doing some back to school, and some, right-wing person who's all on a website, manifesto, talking about killing innocent Americans, just walks in and starts shooting? That's kind of where our country is headed. So I call on Republicans and Democrats to work together, but we have two pieces of legislation right now that is making its way through the legislative process where I think that Republicans and Democrats can work together on.
Phil, I know I'm going to agree with you because I don't buy this blame on Trump because we've had mass shootings with other presidents.
But no president has tweeted. No president has gone to a rallies
But we've had
and
so much,
spurred.
some of the
Barack
most,
Obama never did that.
Wait a
I know,
minute.
but we have
George
had
Bush
some of the
never
worst
did that.
mass shootings in history.
Bill Clinton
We've had
never
kids
did
shot
that.
in elementary
You told
school
me
and
a
a high
tweet.
school.
Show me a tweet
Bernie Sanders,
or a statement.
Bernie
No,
Sanders,
president, you're spinning.
you've filibustered here. Now,
No, I'm stating
Bernie
facts.
Sanders had a supporter.
He's not a president.
Bernie Sanders had a supporter that tried to shoot about 5 or 6 Republican congressmen, and it was based on, he said, Bernie's attacks and slanders against the Republicans in general.
Has
now,
any other president-
you politicized. I
And
think
then
we
the
ought to
Republicans
tone
did
down.
nothing. They did
I think
nothing.
you're making the point to our viewers with
Yes.
just this crosstalk and discussion. We need to tone it down on both sides in terms of whether it's tweeting or whether it's in terms of this viciousness by Beto O'Rourke and some of your Democratic
No, well-
candidates
But I think this
that
is
are
the problem.
completely changed the gun debate. It
Everybody
ought to be
wants
about the
blame
victims.
the other party,
No,
and
I'm not
nobody's coming
blaming-
up with solutions.
I basically gave you 2 solutions. I started off my comment saying there's 2 bills right now going through the state legislature.
But Phil, what are the likelihood of those bills getting passed with a Brian Kemp as governor? We know about the ads that we saw last year. You know, he's pro Second Amendment.
He is, and I think a majority of the legislature is pro Second Amendment, including some Democrats. I do go back to my original comments on privacy. I wouldn't mind taking a look. That's why you have legislation, and actually, in the Georgia legislature, I have to say that there are some bipartisan things that get done. I think you've got to identify and deter dangerous individuals. I respect what both sides are trying to do at the state level. I just said at the state level, you ought to look at the mental health issue. I think we all agree on that.
And let's be fair to the governor. I think he's said that he's going to look at this, okay? And even the president, for the first time, through his presidency, used the term white supremacist, right? So let me give him a little credit for verbalizing something. But my grandmother always told me...
It wasn't the first time, but he did condemn it. You ought to be happy.
Okay,
You
let
aren't-
Theron
you-
finish. Let Theron
Anything he
finish.
says is you don't like.
No, it's not that. I just don't want y'all to act like this president hasn't been tweeting when he used the term that
been
there's an
inciting.
invasion going on.
Don't forget the
and we
left.
should-
I agree with Lori. It's both sides.
No.
You won't admit
There's
to that.
only one president at a time, though.
You know, the political left is very vicious on this social media,
Stop-
and this
is where
inflames
I
it.
keep going back. Let's stop the finger pointing. You offered solutions.
I gave you 2 solutions, and I'm saying this governor is saying that he's going to look at it,
And
the
that's all
president,
he's saying,
yeah,
too.
that's all he's saying.
just posturing,
But
I
here's
think.
what needs to happen:
No
a
leadership.
brave Republican and a brave Democrat,
Absolutely.
he or she needs to stand up together in Georgia and say, we united are going to look at a bipartisan solution to this gun control and gun safety issue we have in our state.
And I think the red flag law
And I think
is a
you
good
can do
place to
that.
start.
I think you can do that.
All right. We're going to move on now to the city of Atlanta, where Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms took a bold step, banning the use of electric scooters and bikes from 9 p.m. until 4 a.m. I applaud her for this action because this is when a lot of those deadly scooter accidents have happened. But is there anything else that can be done here? It's kind of time to take a pause, a breath here, Theron.
Look, this is a great move by the mayor. It's a temporary solution to a problem that has sort of become mainstream in this city. I still believe that this is a viable solution for some of our transportation needs. If you look at what Commissioner King said, he said this is an important solution towards last mile transportation innovative ideas to save taxpayers money. You also know that this is a private enterprise that's basically trying to help with public transit. And so I think that this mayor is to be applauded. Now, with the temporary ban, I wanted to say to our viewers that if you're riding a scooter before 9 o'clock, your scooter is not just going to automatically shut down at 9 o'clock, but you will not be able to
rent after that.
Correct. You won't be able to activate a new ride. And so what you saw, Lori, is the operators came right away and praised the mayor and said, hey, thank you for doing this, but we want to work with you to look at our streets and our roads and designs and infrastructure to really make sure that we can become a more bike and scooter friendly city.
Okay, Theron, don't forget to disclose.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've worked for Lime, and I've done it for about 5 shows now. Phil would do it if I forget to do it, so it's totally fine.
Good.
Phil, we've talked about this, countless times on the show. A good move by the mayor.
I think it is a good move, but it's a half move, and I think, and I'm very sympathetic to the e-scooter companies. I'm very sympathetic to folks in urban areas that don't want to use cars. I think we've all agreed on this panel that it came last summer. and the city was not ready for it. And I'll echo some points that Theron makes. We still have to boost infrastructure on the streets where they're riding, and I think you and I have been very worried about the sidewalks. But I do think you won't like this. I think we have to have a temporary total ban until we get this right. We need to have various parts of Midtown and downtown where there's construction, where you cannot do e-scooters. We need to have barricades. We need to have enforcement. It would be a temporary one, but that would be my solution.
But
I think they're also looking at creating some bike lanes with guardrails.
There's not a lot of room left, though. That's what I'm saying.
But Phil has done his due
real quick, we
diligence.
gotta wrap up.
He's talked to council members. I know this, and not all council members are on board with that. I think you see a split, and I think that this move by the mayor gives the council members the opportunity to talk amongst themselves. So no one is going for a full ban right now. That's not the temperament of the council. That's definitely not the temperament of the mayor right now.
All right, we're going to move on because coming up, despite a good economy, Governor Brian Kemp is calling on state agencies to cut their budgets. We'll discuss coming up.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Email them at georgiagang@foxtv.com.
Governor Brian Kemp making good on a campaign promise to reel in state spending, calling on state agencies to cut their budget requests by at least 4%. Some Georgians finding this surprising considering the state of the economy, Theron.
Well, listen, I think that the governor's basically, again, I mean, I gave him A- for his first 100 days based on his campaign promises, Alexis.
And rightly so.
Yeah, rightly so. But listen, I think what I went back and read the article. I think what he's saying, he wants an overall 4% cut. But I think for our viewers, he's not going to cut every single agency about 4%.
Education, Medicaid,
yeah,
are going to be tough.
And then at a time with EPD, we've talked a lot about what's going on in that. So look, I think the governor is coming out and sort of forecasting that the Georgia economy, while it's still doing well, we all know that a lot of folks are talking about on a national level that there may be a recession. We look at what the stock market is doing. And so I think this governor is to be commended for forecasting out, to say, hey, look, let's look at some ways that we can cut government.
Phil, this is a conservative's dream. It's tax cuts and a cut in spending.
Well, I'm in favor of tax cuts and cuts in spending. I don't know of any department in any government that can't trim some fat. However, there's always a however here. I think that Governor Kemp would be wise to review what State Senator John Albers tried to do, and the governor, surprisingly to me, vetoed, and that was have on these tax breaks, these special interest tax breaks, like the one for Delta Fuel, a company that makes $4 billion or something in profit, and we give tax breaks. I think we ought to have an economic analysis whenever the legislature votes on a break. That's hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue that are not coming into state coffers. That could ease some of this. Well, I agree with Theron's analysis. I do think that the governor needs to send a strong message in the 2020 legislature that we could get more money in the coffers by being more careful with special interest tax breaks.
And by not cutting taxes every time you turn around.
But that stimulates the economy.
Well, perhaps it does, but why are we having to cut the budget? Because the state is continuing to grow. People are coming into the state, so I don't know how you can say we're wasting money because people are here. We need the services.
There is waste in government.
Well, they should eliminate that, of course.
We're going to move on to perhaps another surprise, because did Georgia's Secretary of State jump the gun announcing new voting machines before they passed state testing? Phil, what do you make of this?
I tell you, we could spend the whole show on the Secretary of State and the new voting machines. Where do we start? I think we ought to start by the fact that maybe we ought to clarify from a couple weeks ago because of erroneous media reports. For the viewers, the new system, of course, is a partial touchscreen and a partial paper ballot system. There is a receipt which can be audited, which a lot of people do like. But there is, and you've heard me say this, there's a barcode on the paper that you're getting. And is this reassuring to people?
This has been
a huge problem.
It's the barcode what the machine reads.
That's
not your
exactly
actual
right.
printout of your
Yes, and if you're doing a recount, it reads the barcode.
So they should give us a barcode reader for our cell phone so we can make sure that it says
there might be an app.
I hope we have a future show on this. As I alluded to in the last broadcast, the state is really getting beat up in this federal court hearings that have been occurring over the last 2 weeks ago, and there are some deficiencies in the Secretary of State's office. Now, bear in mind, all 159 counties run the elections. It's not all the Secretary of State's office. There's been some deficiencies that have been corrected, but it's actually shocking on some of the deficiencies that have not been corrected.
All right. Well, this week, Fox 5's Angelique Proctor talked to hotel managers and business owners in downtown Atlanta complaining about how aggressive the panhandlers are becoming. Phil, I know you wanted to talk about this, but I want to start with Theron on this issue. You know, we don't want to turn into a Seattle or a San Francisco, but is the problem getting worse, Theron?
Listen, it's something that I think that the city and all the different, Midtown Alliance, Central Atlanta Progress, we have these, I think they call them ambassadors that are down on the streets. And so, look, when you walk through the streets of Atlanta, number one, I do feel safe. I'm not scared of panhandlers because they're people just like we are. Unfortunately, whatever turn happened in their life, they're making a choice to ask people for money. And so I don't think there's anything wrong with that. What I do think is happening now is the aggressiveness of it, and it's coming a little bit more repetitive. And so I think that you'll see these different organizations come together along with the leadership of the mayor to really find a very sensible way to treat them like humans, but also reduce the amount of panhandling because it has gotten a little bit more aggressive in the last few months.
Phil.
Well, I think Angelique Proctor had a good package. You showed some shocking videos. I've never seen, for example, public urination on the streets of Atlanta. You've been seeing that. I haven't seen really the homeless stretched out in front of major hotels downtown. You talk to the police, and there are places where even the police are very worried about going. And so this has to be addressed. I think it's homelessness and panhandling. I even saw some tents the other day that are pitched with people sleeping on a section of North Avenue. That's how it all started in San Francisco. I think you had the closing, we've talked about of the Pine Street facility. You've had the stupid closing of the city jail right at the wrong time. The mayor and council never had a plan B. And you're right, this summer is getting really bad. I know we've got to be careful with our tourism and convention business. I'll say this about former Mayor Kasim Reed, although I've been highly critical of him. He understood that the money that flowed in from hotel and motel taxes benefited everyone in the city of Atlanta and benefited everyone in the state of Georgia. I think that we've taken the eye off the ball, this mayor and council. We have got to get back to some enforcement.
So is it that you just feel unsafe, or you just don't want homeless people in downtown Atlanta, or you don't want them to panhandle?
I want the great spin. I want the homeless taken care of.
Well, let me just newsflash.
I want the police to crack down on quality of life crimes that affect all of us.
It's an age-old issue, Alexis.
Absolutely, and it is terrible. And hopefully, with the repurposing of the city jail that's close to the Gateway Center that the Mayor Shirley Franklin opened to address issues of homelessness, and that will help us get some kind of solution, because the people, I think a majority of people who are homeless have mental illness problems or alcohol dependency or drug dependency, and they need treatment. They don't need to be put in jail, Phil. They need to have treatment.
I don't disagree with that. I think the closing of the jail was premature. Maybe, I don't know how much it'll cost to repurpose that building, and that's another issue, but we shouldn't have just willy-nilly done that at the same time with no plan B. But I don't disagree with anything you've just said.
Okay. All right, we're moving on because local leaders in Cobb, Fulton, and Newton counties are pushing for stronger action against two plants that sterilize medical equipment and pump out cancer-causing pollution. That's coming up.
Join the discussion on the Georgia Gang Facebook page and watch past episodes on the Georgia Gang YouTube channel.
Local leaders are pushing for independent air testing near two plants that release ethylene oxide, a known cancer-causing chemical. The EPA identified 109 areas where cancer risks were elevated, except the feds didn't tell us, and neither did state environmental officials. Some of those areas are in Fulton, Cobb, and Newton counties near these plants. This independent testing, if I lived in these areas, Theron, couldn't come soon enough.
Yeah, and I think that when we talked about this really for the last 3 weeks, I think this is our third or fourth week talking about this, I do see some movement between the governor's office, EPD and EPA, and also I think if you look at some of the recent reports that this company was sort of in their eyes going above and beyond with some of the reporting, but the problem is the neighbors and the people who were around the areas were not notified of some of the things that they were doing. So let's just make sure we do that for our viewers.
Well, the company was self-reporting, and maybe I'm wrong. The only thing I've heard of the governor's office so far is he's going to hold meetings with residents.
So the
I don't know what action we're taking yet.
So the goal now is to figure out a way for them to continue to self-report, because I think that they need to make that self-reporting more visible to the public, but also give the EPD, the EPA, and more importantly, the governor's office a way to independently monitor the progress towards this. And so I think that was the one thing that's sort of been uncovered.
Well, I really agree with a lot of your points. In fact, the city of Smyrna is going to be doing an independent outreach. And I'll give you, this is another example of actually some good bipartisanship here. You've got both Democrats and Republicans, and we all ought to be speaking on the same voice. If toxic levels are too high, let's fix it.
Yep. I agree.
Well, former state senator and candidate for governor Michael Williams apologizing to his constituents and wants to move on after pleading guilty to making a false police report. Now he says he should have picked a candidate instead of running himself. And of course, you remember him because he's the one who had the deportation bus that, of course, broke down. Phil, kind of a time to move on now?
You know, I am glad that there is a politician, and it's very rare, that actually gets up and does a press conference and says, I'm an idiot, and I've done this and that. I wish more people...
And I'll go home now.
And I'll go home now. I wish more people would do that because, obviously, in this day and age of PR, there are embarrassments to both parties because all parties have idiots that shouldn't be doing this. And I call him a political idiot. I think he did the right thing, and I admire him for fessing up.
There was just so many tentacles to this one. What he pled guilty to, and you know, some of his, shall we say,
antics.
Yes, antics.
Well, I think also what he said was that he wasn't ready for prime time. He said if you looked at his campaign, they made a decision within the campaign to try to do these sort of crazy things to get name recognition. And so, you know, while I definitely want to take partisanship out of it, I mean, let's not take away that this man has pled guilty. I mean, his life is going to be reorganized. Hopefully he'll get a second chance at life. But this is also the man who was one of the first supporters of Donald Trump when he was running for...
I knew you had to make it political.
No, what I'm saying is, and so, but no, what I'm saying is, give me a second, is that he was very, very critical about deportation. I mean, if you look at that bus, some of the things. So I think you see an evolution of how he feels bad or how he sort of ramped up some of the rhetoric.
He didn't feel bad about those issues, and those are legitimate issues. And of course, we could cite Democrats that have done just as bad.
But they didn't plead guilty to stealing
Oh, they
their own
have.
stuff.
The chairman of the state Democratic Party a few years ago pleaded guilty to crimes. You seem to forget all of that.
But I'm talking about this guy stole his own stuff. And
well, we could go down the list. My point is,
crazy.
both parties have these people.
But this one is particularly outlandish.
Well, on that note, we're going to come up with winners and losers. Stay tuned.
Time now for the week's winners and losers.
All right, winners and losers. Let's see. Alexis, we'll start with you.
Okay, great. At first, I want to recognize the great Toni Morrison passed this week. She was a Nobel laureate, and a Pulitzer Prize winner, and a Presidential Medal of Honor winner in recognition of her amazing writing and career. And also, I want to pitch my high school. It's having its first fun run and walk to celebrate its 95th anniversary. Booker T. Washington High School was the first public high school for blacks in the state of Georgia, and I'm now recently joined the board of the BTW Legacy Foundation that is inaugurating this race.
Well, congratulations.
To support scholarships for students.
That's great. Phil?
Well, I think we ought to make winners the survivors of those two horrible mass shootings, the first responders who did an excellent job, obviously the medical personnel, and I'm going to say I think the president gave a very good speech condemning hate, racism. I do have a winner, and I think that you'll join me on this one. We went over to Atlanta businessman Marco Betty's new restaurant in the Buckhead business section, Savano. It's a great pizza, and we like to support small businesses on this show, so he's a winner. And you know, if you shift sites, I'm going to go over to Augusta. Atlanta's not the only area where you've got a federal corruption probe. They started one over in Augusta with a county commissioner named Sammy Cias, who is accused of mishandling money. So that's sad to see.
All right,
All right, real quickly, want to give a big shout out to Frank Morris, who was with UPS for 35 years, a very, very big figure at the Capitol. He retired. Also want to recognize Glendon Oakley Jr. This is a soldier who saved multiple children during the El Paso shootings, and he also joined the Army in Macon. So definitely want to give him a big shout out for his bravery. Also in DeKalb County, Commissioner Larry Johnson did a Census 2020 Make DeKalb Count big event this week, and so definitely want to commend him for that. And then also to get it outside of Atlanta, I want to recognize State Representative Patty Bentley, who represents Dooley, Peach, and Macon and Taylor counties for receiving the 2019 Legislative Service Award for the Association of County commissioners in Georgia. So definitely want to give her a big shout out.
Well, good job taking it outside of Atlanta this week.
Yeah.
So one of my winners is Marietta School Superintendent Gabe Rivera. He's donating his first $10,000 bonus check to application fees for his students who apply early to college. And we're going to hear from him this Wednesday on Good Day Atlanta. Also, a very touching scene out of Hall County this week where deputies escorted Caden Dixon to his first day of 4th grade. His dad, Nicholas Dixon, was killed in the line of duty last month during a shootout with 4 teenagers, and it was just an incredible show of support. There were not a lot of dry eyes out there for him.
That was very touching.
Very moving.
It was beautiful. Well, thank you all so much for joining us this week. We will be back again next week. Have a great one. Bye-bye.
The opinions expressed in this broadcast are those of the panelists appearing in this program.